Good evening, community members. Welcome. I hope you are all well. Welcome to our webinar this evening that's going to focus on empowering young minds, breaking the stigma around men's mental health. And before I introduce our wonderful speaker this evening, I just want to let you know that on the 6th of November, so that's the first week after we return from the well-deserved half-term break, we will have our first webinar of Michaelmas 2, which is going to focus on helping your child develop a positive self-image. And that's going to be led by our fantastic kind of friend of the family at Forest, Alicia Drummond, who is the founder of the Wellbeing Hub. So please do log in on the 6th of November, but you will be reminded in the weekly bulletin about that. As usual, we're not expecting any technical difficulties, but if we do have any, please do bear with us. What is really special about our speaker this evening is that he was on forest soil, if you want to say it like that, last week speaking to our year 10s. And I hope you have read the overview from Miss Arthur, our fantastic head of RSHE, and Miss Green, our assistant head of RSHE, where they outlined how we will respond to the RSC statutory guidance for year 10 this year. So they will have drop-down mornings and afternoons to focus on a variety of topics covered in the RSHE statutory guidance. And we were really lucky to have our speaker, Jamie Coupe, who came and spoke to the pupils. They were in awe of him. They really represented themselves so well, but they were, as always, typical Foresters, so insightful and inquisitive about the broad topic that he was discussing and that he's going to be discussing with you this evening. This is for all senior school parents and carers, and if there's any prep school parents and carers watching as well, it's absolutely fine. But I just wanted to introduce and for you to get to know Jamie a bit more for those pupils that met with him last week. So Jamie Coupe is a passionate mental health and wellbeing speaker, coach and mentor, and he's currently pursuing an advanced diploma in integrative counselling with the Iron Mill, which is BACP accredited. Jamie also holds a BA Honours in professional vocal performance, so a really diverse speaker we have with us this evening. His career began on stage with the band Maggie Cassidy, Marshall Records, alongside songwriting credits with Sony and Ultra. I've already got my signature from him. Years of touring exposed him to countless raw conversations with other musicians and fans, highlighting the urgent need for open discussions around mental health. And I hope you know at Forest, that's why you've committed as a family to Forest, that we normalise the discussions around mental health. It's part of our everyday conversations, and it's obviously part of our RSHE and PD curriculum. So we're really, really excited to have Jamie with us this evening to speak to parents and carers after he's been spoken to the year 10s last week. He will be back in the Lent and Trinity term to cover a range of topics, but the next one he's going to be looking at is specifically the dad vacuum, and that's going to be looking at mentoring and healthy male role models, which will be really, really exciting. So we're really excited to have Jamie as part of the extended Forest family. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jamie. Have a wonderful evening.
Hello, thank you so much. Just building on that, I really enjoyed not only being invited to Forest School, working with Natasha, with Emily, with Grace, but I can just remember driving up to the school and seeing these wonderful parents who are clearly working so hard to put their kids through such an incredible school. And then my entry to the school, seeing all the students, the way they are, was really special. And again, being invited in to speak to year 10 was incredibly special as well. So thank you very much for that. And I've come from actually quite a strange background in terms of moving towards men's mental health, but I will get into that and I'll explain what I'm doing as we go. But just a few things I wanted to say, because I'm aware I'm talking to not only parents, I'm talking to carers, I might be talking to parents of children who are kind of younger as opposed to the older students that I spoke to. So two things I want to kind of qualify. The first one is I talk about men's mental health, but honestly, the way I've experienced it is a lot more around masculine mental health. So when I say that, I'm not talking about gender. I want to be really clear about that. And when we go through this, I'm going to be looking at kind of masculine approaches to therapy. And I'll explain that. And the interesting part, particularly with my company as well, is that we are integrating the kind of more feminine core approaches to therapy with the masculine core approaches to therapy. And we're balling them up and giving to people as and when they need them. So I'll explain that as we go. So it's not strictly a gender thing. And also talking about kind of male role models, that is again looking at children in a sense of what role models do they need. I'll talk about my journey with that. And secondly, as well, the word suicide comes with so much weight, and it's pretty much the reason why I do what I do. But just in case you have kids around in the house, or if yourselves you've been through it or experienced it, or you're kind of in relation with people who might be struggling with it, when I talk about suicide, it's, as I've written here, it's suicide prevention through well-being. So tonight I will be mentioning it. There'll be a kind of certain focal points, but as I said to the year 10s, and as I say to every school that I go to, yes, we need a trigger warning, because it can be quite a raw subject, something I've been around for a lot of my life, unfortunately, but it is a raw subject. But at the same time, with that trigger warning, I always think it's absolutely crucial to understand that the fact that we have a trigger warning around it is part of the reason why we struggle with it, particularly culturally. So that's how I mention it. And again, it's preventative, particularly for young people. And I'll mention my other kind of work as I go, but I actually find that talking to young people about the prevention through wellbeing aspect, they do understand that it prevents them from ever being in a position where they do feel suicidal. So just two provisos, but I'll be kind of pushing more focus, more specifics as we go. And what I want to do for tonight, because I'm aware that we've got a PowerPoint, we've got someone talking, I don't want to be too kind of reminiscent of school or lectures, even when I'm doing talks in school. So what I want to do, I know not all of you year 10 parents, but what I want to do is kind of parallel what we have in front of us here, parents, carers, as we're talking. But also I want to bring in some of the things from the talk. What I'm going to do is kind of parcel how I put it to the young people along with what you've got in front of you and what's relevant to yourselves. So we'll go through that as we go. So who am I? Really kind introduction, but the way I like to think of it now is very much, again, suicide prevention through wellbeing. So with my company, Primal Grace, we do a combination of things. We've got a charitable foundation, which goes to your Muay Thai gyms, your boxing gyms, or we're kind of in relation with the cathedral down here in Exeter. And essentially what we're trying to do is get our team, get myself predominantly, to do suicide awareness courses at our local Muay Thai gym, and having a presence every week, or sponsoring fighters who then help the young people. So it's going where we're needed, and maybe not necessarily where people are wanted, because the issue is currently, particularly with kind of masculine mental health, men's mental health, there's a lot of places where men are, for better or worse, kind of seeking a certain expression, maybe through that boxing, through that Muay Thai, particularly through sport. So what we want to do to get ourselves down there to try and be where we're needed. And the other side of Primal Grace is working with corporations, working with private clients, schools such as this as well. So that's working with people who maybe do have some funds available. So we do that for them. And then a huge part of what we do is then funneling that help to places where it's needed. So that's Primal Grace. Probably what's most relevant, particularly today, and I'm allowed to talk about this as I'm working in schools down in Devon, but I work for Exeter City Football Club as well, or more specifically, they have a charitable trust. And for example, today I was in a school in Axminster, and I have two groups of 4 kids, so 8 kids across the day. And the way that we engage with this mental health for those young people, and what might be relevant for yourselves as well, if this is kind of new to you, is I'll take them to sort of 2-3 hours per group, so kind of a half day each. And what we'll do is predominantly go and play sport. There'll be kind of 50 to 60% of that is us just going out and playing football, playing cricket, playing rugby, getting them, and these are normally kids that are in kind of reset or return to learning rooms, having them outside, we're talking, we're putting them in groups, we're kind of able to have those parallel conversations, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But then the other kind of 40% is these 10 pillars of wellbeing, which I'll mention in a second. These are really, really practical, and they understand these are suicide preventative. So again, like I said at the start, it's not necessarily that I lead always with suicide prevention, particularly with young people, because they don't always need to know that. But what I do is very much focused on that, and it's very practical. So I'll be talking about that as we go. So again, coaching and mentoring, that's working particularly with young men, so kind of later teenage years, early 20s. That's the kind of area I found most needed in my own private kind of coaching work. Again, counselling training at the Iron Mill, because it's incorporating all of that I was raised by a therapist personally. She's still working today, so I'm very lucky to be in and around that skill set and see the benefit of it through my entire life. And normally, again, I put Samaritans there. When I was about 21, I was on the phone to Samaritans, so I'm a kind of trained listener with the Samaritans. And what that means, for those of you that don't know, is I was on kind of 4 to 5 hour shifts on the phone with people who are really, really struggling. Samaritans is a suicide prevention helpline. And as much as I learned there, it kind of just sparked me to think, this is the kind of the end, if you will. Like, this is where people are already really in a difficult place that maybe can't come out of. They're struggling in different ways. So it kind of just lit that question in my mind of, well, what can we do to prevent it? That's why for me, it's bringing suicide prevention through wellbeing to young people, to schools, to companies, in order to prevent people ever having to need to call the Samaritans. That's the interesting part of what I'm trying to do. Exeter City are wonderful in supporting me to essentially lead up 2 programs and focus on mental health, focus on wellbeing, focus on being practical, make it kind of integrated in the sense that they're doing it socially, they're doing it in their communities, and just focusing on what these young people need. So that's where I come from in that sense. And just to borrow from the year 10 talk, we had a theatre full of kids. It was fantastic, and Emily and Grace are incredible. And thank you for having me, first of all. On the stage, 100 or so kids around me. And what I want to do is explain to them, demonstrate as a male of a certain age that looks a certain way, why I talk about this. So I can't do it in the same way, but the story I always tell is, rewind a year and a half. So it's sort of April, year and a half ago. And I'm stood on this kind of 6-story apartment complex in Mexico. I'm on holiday, I'm working online. I'm actually living abroad at the time anyway. So I'm living in France, working online, away in Mexico, with my girlfriend, kind of ex-French model. Got my youth, I've got my health, all of these things. Eastbourne College love this as well, because they have some issues around kind of lad culture and what is success. And I kind of put to the young people, I'm in this position that they kind of all assume is great. Okay, cool, he's got a bit of money, he's living abroad, he's working online, he's kind of traveling, he's got a partner, he's got a youth, got health. What I always do is kind of get closer and closer to the edge of the stage. If I'm doing that here on Zoom, it's kind of what I'm representing. And as I'm getting closer and closer to the edge of that stage, all these things that you think are brilliant actually become, so the power of repression is what I talk about. They become the force that kind of tap you on the shoulder in a very negative way. So again, I'm at the edge of the swimming pool, 6 stories up, everything you want in life. I can clearly remember all I could think about was throwing myself off the edge. That was the position I was in. And I always say this to young people. I know it can be shocking, and I appreciate that the idea of suicide is very difficult for so many reasons. But just to borrow there, that's the kind of the weight of what I bring to these talks. And the important thing is because they see someone like me with all the things they think they need, things they're told to have on social media. But I was genuinely in a position where it didn't matter to me. So I talk about the power of repression, meaning that those things in my life currently were not at all what I wanted. I was unhappy living in France. I was unhappy in the relationship, probably spending too much money while traveling. I hadn't found this current part of my life, which I'm blessed to have, working to prevent the things that I suffered with. And again, it's not money, it's not things that people tell you need. It's really trying to address the fact that you need to deal with the things in your life. And again, we don't have it, but for us, there's a kind of stage that comes down the side here. So I always illustrate that, say life issues are coming at you, because I was ignoring the fact that in my job, relationship, all these things you need. I imagine, again, if I'm doing that in the talk, I'm imagining kind of life's issues walking up, and you're trying to deal with them one by one, maybe shaking their hand. If you're repressing things, which is a massive thing for young people, unfortunately, you're letting these issues go past, and it's attritional over time, but they do build up to this kind of repression, and then unfortunately it can lead to thoughts of self-harm, can lead to thoughts of suicide as well. So that's how I normally pitch it. It's much less interesting and dramatic here on Zoom, but that's the kind of thing I normally talk about. And the beautiful thing about Forest School, and all schools unfortunately, is that no matter what these young people are going through, when I say to them, please do not talk over this, because you do not know who is suffering, and often those who are suffering and might need to hear this shouldn't be distracted from it. And you can hear a pin drop. And that's the beauty. I'll talk about that later, but there's a huge part which is social in terms of suicide prevention Forest School were brilliant, honestly, because there were so many kids you could tell from different areas of life and different interests, but they were just pin drop silent because I said to them, how you react to someone's vulnerability over here, top right, actually affects this person even if you don't know them. So that's something I always talk about as well at schools, the kind of importance of culture and community. So just trying to parcel what's relevant to you now and what I deliver to the young people, because I think there's a real gap sometimes between kind of what parents and carers are seeing, what schools are understanding, and then what I'm seeing at my work with Primal Grace or with Exeter City, even with Iron Mill Samaritans. So that's just a brief overview of what we do. So again, it's a big goal, but zero suicide worldwide. And the reason we say that is it sounds impossible, but there's so much I've experienced that needs to change, and so many young people. I talk about the kind of gap in research around what actually works for young people, which is why I do what I do, why I go to schools. There's a lot that might need to change. A lot of us might need to think quite a lot about what we value, what we do, how we spend our time in relation to kind of young people's well-being. So bottom left there is that's actually a client who's happy for us to use these photos, but we went away to Madeira. And again, these are people with the available resources, like companies, like schools, like private clients, to have incredible experiences that are really relevant to them. And then we take that funding, take that knowledge and understanding, and then we deploy that in schools, communities, areas where there might not be a lot of money, might not be that kind of presence. So we're trying to rebalance, and it's my team down on the right, and then where we were in Madeira. So just a brief overview today, and I'm aware we have, up to 45 minutes from now, but I will leave a pause should there be any questions. I understand it's strange, this is all kind of coming at you, but I obviously know all these slides, I've done all of this. I say the same to young people, that if you have any questions, please interrupt me. If you have any questions or something that didn't make sense or something you want to challenge, I'm aware you might want to do that Thursday night, but please do stop me. So what we're talking about, as I said, men's mental health is more like masculine approach to therapy. So I myself have a very strong feminine core, which makes me very good at my job. And my mother raised me. Essentially, that's part of the journey I've had is a very, very ill, very absent father who's still present in our lives, kind of interrupting, I guess, my own progression. So that's why men's mental health and well-being is a real interest for me, because there's so much of what we do well, that kind of feminine core, the traditional, what is available, but there's still so much to learn, and I wouldn't take any credit for it myself. It's just how we combine it and how we deliver it, particularly for young people, again, preventing things. So that's solution-focused wellbeing, which I'll definitely do towards the end here. We're developing an app as well, which I'll be sharing with schools as part of the charitable outreach for just those check-ins. Importance of friendship, community, and collaboration. It's kind of everything. My mother actually kind of spoke to me about what we're doing. She kind of coined it as community-based healing. So if we pop back here, notice on the bottom left, we've got, that's our mountain guide who are lifting, but we've got the mentor on the right, myself, and then you've got two other people that work with me, so that the pressure is not fully on that young man to just be one-on-one. It's a big thing we're learning. Again, on the right there is a kind of whole group of people, that community-based healing. So importance of friends, community, and collaboration. As I said, Forest School were exceptional, as young people tend to be, with the weight and importance of this subject, because even if you're not necessarily suicidal or thinking about self-harm, low mood, difficulty, depression is absolutely everywhere in young people, unfortunately, which I'll explain. So that vision, no more than zero. And just very briefly, as I said, zero suicide worldwide, but no more than zero was the origin of this, when I thought there are so many statistics of what young people are doing to themselves, or having done to them in terms of that self-harm or suicidality, that there's a statistic. There's almost like a recognized median of what should be happening. And part of me just questioned, why is there a single young person? Unfortunately, I can understand, as I said with the Samaritans, why maybe people later in life or in difficult life situations might end up taking their own lives or self-harming. But to me, there's a lot of work we can still do for young people who then obviously grow up to then inform culture and improve things like that. So no more than zero was my kind of attempt at a promise to myself to work with this. And those are the main things that I will offer to schools, offer my work. So this was, again, it's important to be honest. I wouldn't even call it dramatic, but this is what saved me. So right now it's a company, right now it's a movement, right now it's a charitable foundation, and going to schools, we're working with sports teams, we're going kind of all over the place. So that's what it has become. But primal grace, which is my philosophy, was just what brought me back from feeling, as I mentioned, it's something that I think I wrote it on a journal. I can picture it in my mind. I just wrote primal grace and I offered that to someone that I was working with. And they went, "What's that?" That might have something similar to dad vacuum, which I'll talk about a little bit tonight, but predominantly later on. Just something that I found important to me, something that I found very practical, that worked out. And essentially what primal grace is I take the primal side, which is what we need at a fundamental level. That's biophysiology, ancient practices, that gut-brain connection. So Gabor Mate talks beautifully about that. I'll mention him again a little later. But even if you look at these 10 pillars, probably half of them, if not more, are just what do we need biologically? Because understand currently, particularly in schools, it's very cognitive, it's very applied, as it should be. And a lot of the work that we're doing in cultures, it needs that, right? But again, take these young people earlier, they get outside, they're laughing, they're playing, they're in the sun, they're in nature, you're ticking off 4 or 5. So that's the primal 50%. And the grace side, again, is returning to compassion, science-based best practices for self-care, which is for me kind of scientific studies, psychology, psychotherapy. Religion, spirituality are always crucial as well. I think they're often overlooked in terms of, particularly when people are struggling, there's a need for faith, whether that's in yourself or someone else. These crucial things for me that incorporate into primal grace. So we're taking like everything we've forgotten, tradition, community-based healing, all these kinds of things, plus adding science, religion, spirituality, all of that. And we put it together. Anthropology. So anthropological approach is, again, very simple. What did we used to do? I don't take credit for anything that primal grace does in terms of new ideas. It's how do we combine what we need, what we've always done, together. So that's where primal grace comes from, and hopefully that's helpful. That's at least my philosophy of what helped me, and what I find people who are similar to me, which tend to be, as I said, masculine, tend to be men. But thankfully we've got quite a lot of young women that are picking up on this as well, which is just wonderful to me. And great schools like Forest as well, we had young men and young women together. That's crucial. It's really important to understand the interaction on both sides. So that's primal grace. This is another vision of mine. I don't normally talk about this with young people as is here, so I do apologize if this is quite confronting in terms of the statistics. And so I don't tend to lean too heavily on that with young people. I might pop this in at the end, it's the whole thing, which is really practical. But this is, again, somewhat of a vision, and I feel like might apply more to parents and carers in terms of understanding. But to me, suicide as an emotional state would remove all the stigma. So for example, I won't read the statistics because you can see them if you want to read them, or they are everywhere. It's just for me to highlight some of the importance. But as I think about it, is much like if someone is pregnant, much like if someone might have broken their leg, say they have COVID, say they have the flu, all of those states, we as a society understand what to expect and not expect of people in those states, regardless of kind of how you see those areas of, you wouldn't ask someone with a broken leg to run up the stairs. You might not ask someone who is pregnant to do certain things. And we all understand that when you are pregnant, there are certain things that are different about that process. That's all I ask. It's a big ask, but can we look at the state of suicide and self-harm not as a kind of problem, so to speak? I know I've presented it as that, but for me, again, it's people end up there. They don't choose to be there, particularly young people. And as I said, it tended to land quite well at Forest School, as they're enlightened, and the RSHE team are awesome. But as I said to the young people, it's not your fault that you've ever felt like that. Because there are lots of young people, as you can see, who do feel like that. It's not your fault that you got there. There are lots of factors. However, now you know the responsibility is upon yourselves as well as your school, as your family, as your culture, even people like myself. How do we get more awareness? But now the responsibility comes back to what can they do? Because I've experienced a lot of young people feeling very helpless, feeling like, your CAMS, your therapy, it can be trying to like solve kids and get them away. I've even heard, random people I meet in the gym will say that they kind of been trying to be solved and got away. Whereas the crucial thing is, how do we give young people a sense of it not being their fault, but equally, what can they do about it? So this state of suicide for me is it would be a dream that we don't judge it, that we don't add stigma, don't add shame, because those things make things worse, doesn't help. So those are some of the figures. And even found that the Samaritans, for example, when I was on the phones doing my own kind of note taking, I wasn't saving any of the information, but I remember some of the figures, is that if you separate people's life issues that they mentioned on the duration of the phone call, between 7 to 15 issues. For some people, it varies, right? But between 7 and 15 issues led to people feeling like or mentioning thinking about ending their life. Which again, to me, that's crucial, almost actionable steps. I kind of reverse engineer that with people I work with, of writing out those single issues and right, what can we help with? What can be changed? What can't be for now? And I always find that even that first bit is very scary, particularly young people. Even some of my Muay Thai fighters, some people I mentor, they're like, oh, I can do something about this. It's not just a washing machine of emotions. It's no, you can look at these things. So that's why I've mentioned it. And just a quick one. If you take one thing away from this, I always love this, that mum taught me this, but you see the warning sign, it's HALT. So if you see that your young person is either hungry, H, angry, lonely, or tired, encourage them to think about the fact that they probably might not want to make a decision at that point. Maybe they can't necessarily say that they are in the best state of mind to choose to do something. Obviously, with reference to kind of self-harm with suicide, it's crucial. But again, I find this one really helpful because simple, clear things. The young people, they get it straight away. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And often if there's a combination of one or two or three or four, that young person's going to really struggle. And something I always share, which might be on the later slide, but I'll just pull it forward now, is that this incredible training, treating depression in young people with Penny Utton. Dr. Penny Utton is incredible, but she's had on one side the symptoms of being a teenager, so describing a teenager as you see them, and the other side were the symptoms of depression as we see it, and there were literally no difference. There was no difference. That's why she presented it. She said young people are essentially in a state of depression in terms of how we identify symptoms. That's why for me I thought, right, well, how do we get in there? How do we help? But again, young people are very often hungry. They are very often angry, very often lonely. I'd say less so if we can work on that community aspect, but there are a lot of young people, and tired, as you know, as parents and carers, is pretty much a constant. So just something really helpful, hopefully, to just kind of peak that kind of interaction with them, because it's not easy to do. And I don't know your young people as you know them, but just simple things like that can be helpful just to interject. This is crucial. So this one for me probably sits in the center of what I wanted to talk about today. So I might pause a little bit on this one or refer back to it, but individuation stage, as I say to the young people, I say to them, have you heard of puberty? Put their hands up. Yeah, sure. If you heard of, forming your identity, you go, yeah, cool. You heard of being a teenager, they go, yeah, or the menstrual cycle, yeah, all these kind of things. Like, yeah, we know these, we are in these. And again, not easy. They're in these states. Individuation stage is fascinating to me. And it really is an aha moment for a lot of young people. So as I was taught it by Penny Utton, is essentially between the ages of 13 and 25, they are in what we call the individuation stage, where you're going from being someone who is entirely dependent neurologically. That's why we talk about the opioid effect. What struck me was she said it's an opioid level impact on the brain. It's not a small thing. So 13, 25, they are starting to move away from their parents and into society. Sounds simple, but what that means is, and hopefully this is helpful for you as parents if your young people are going back and forth, is that the strength of that love for you as a kid, they depend on you, and they depend on you to help them, to feed them, to do all these things. Of course, they have such a strong reaction, they need that. But the interesting thing, from about 13, give or take, they then swing the other way. So it might be that one day they absolutely love you, they need you, and then 2 days later they might well say, I hate you, mum and dad, I hate you. You might get that strength of reaction. And the really interesting thing is I found a lot of young people in the schools didn't know about this stage. A lot of parents didn't know about this. And some young people go like, oh, so that's why I hate my mum and dad sometimes. And I love them the next day. And the difficult thing is, I think, for young people and for parents, is that will swing and it might change in a week. Because you could easily say, okay, from 13 to 25, it's quite a linear progression and change, and you can predict it. It really isn't. And there's a lot of factors that are kind of maybe not known about it, but individuation stage is crucial. And again, if you take the symptoms of being a teenager and the symptoms of, as I said, it's here, so symptoms of depression, experience of being an adolescent are the same. At least this is type 1 depression, which is the kind of lower functioning, classic kind of, I always picture it, unfortunately, I saw it all the time with my dad, but kind of low energy, no motivation, sleeping, drinking, you know, that classic one. And as I say to young people, again, I'm not a parent, but I see the strength of when I say this is particularly in schools. This stage of life is really hard. I've had it before at schools. At Dauncey School, a fantastic school, I've done a lot of work there. And there's a couple of hundred kids, and I just say this stage of life is hard. I stop, and I say it again. This stage of life is really hard, and kids will cry because they've never been allowed to feel like they can suffer. And a crucial part of that is the 2 types of depression. So if you've seen that there, again, I'll do this with kids. They'll be like, can someone tell me a typical symptom of depression? Type 1 depression, as I call it, low functioning, as they call it in 4th wave CBT, which they're updating. Again, as I've said to it, the classics of all the depression we understand as a society, whereas the interesting one, and particularly in paid schools, in places where they are kind of quite affluent, particularly in businesses, people who are high achieving. I've had a lot of young people as well after talks come and say, oh, thank you for saying that. Can you please say that more? The second type of depression would be characterized as high functioning depression, which I've talked about. And those symptoms are quite interesting because you can have the best grades, you can be in all the sports teams, you can be in drama. It's me telling my own story. Everyone can like you, everyone can know you. And unfortunately, a lot of schools, I can think of 6 out of the 6 or 7 that I've worked with recently, they will have a child like that who is the hyperachiever, and they will not be here anymore. Unfortunately, I've heard it in quite a few schools, is that those type 2 depression, high functioning, everything is going well, they've got everything they need. It can even extend past this kind of age of 25. It might be on their kind of great job out of university, really high achieving, maybe kind of doctorates or really high paying jobs, and everyone goes, wow, they're doing really well. There's this sad fact of unrelenting standards of perfectionism. That's that second type of depression, is kind of high functioning depression, whereby nothing is ever good enough. So again, what we see from the outside is this kid going, wow, they're brilliant. They're absolutely smart. And suddenly, internally, they're coming down. So suddenly there's that change, and they might, hopefully if they have support around them, they might disclose that, as a lot of young people I've seen and met do. And they go to their safeguarding, they go to their counselling services, which, again, if anything in this, it reminds you of an issue or something you've seen in your young person, please do go through the school procedures or your own procedures as a family to address that. But so many young people, I hope, have been helped and, again, prevented from ending up in a really bad place, because I talk about this and you see them, it hits them really hard. Again, just because you go to a nice school, your parents work so hard to put you there, your loving family, all these things, it's really crazy. But having that awareness that sometimes within that, the kids feel like they can't express how they feel. So again, I'm really aware that can sound like it's the problem. It's not problems of parents and carers. This is just what's happening. If I go to kind of, I want to be really careful here, but kind of state-funded, low-income young people that I work with, for example, the groups that I work with today, they tend to be a lot more type 1, so they're struggling with the classic symptoms of depression, because no one's there, no one's helping them, members of their family are gone, there might be abuse, that kind of thing. But then schools that are paid, or companies or businesses or private work that I do, at the other side, again, people assume it's easy, but no, there's a whole other secondary kind of level of pressures. And I want to be careful of how I say that, particularly in present company, because I know there's so much work that goes into putting children through great schools like Forest, but I just want to make you aware. And I hope it's not upsetting. And again, I'm open to feedback, open to questions at any point, but there are 2 types of depression. So it's crucial understanding that, hopefully more. This training was amazing for me. And social scaffolding is kind of healthy, stable, diverse social groups and their protective factors. That's all I'm talking about tonight. How do we protect young people from that? Not only protect them from feeling like that, but they have brilliant lives as well. I find that young people, they're really used to doing the 10 pillars test now. to the point one of my students today, I think she's 12, she was running our 10 pillars test as the teacher because she's been thinking about the schools, and they come in every week and they want to know how they've done, and they start thinking about their habits, and that's how they end up having wonderful lives, and it supports their academia, it supports their growth, it supports their behavior. That's why I focus on this. Their lives are better. It's not just about suicide prevention, it's going the other way, so their lives are better, everyone's included. I think the dangerous roles of screens and social media, there are probably people that can cover that in more depth than myself, but it's always worth, I'm sure you will do actually, but parents are amazing at actually understanding this probably more than the young people. But the role of screens, social pressures, particularly for young women, it's really acute, and for young men it's kind of never good enough, for young women it's never good enough, but just different messaging, and social media. Mick Cooper is someone I think is incredibly inspiring. I've again been able to go to some training with him, had a few conversations with him around his word was weird. It was quite interesting. We did a lot of research that under 18s really are not that responsive to traditional therapy, which is why I have my company, why I'm making my effort to do what I'm trying to do. Is because a lot of young people report that counselling and therapy in the current state is weird. So that was really exciting to me. I think Mick Cooper is amazing because he's brave enough to start saying that quite a while ago. When I did the training with him, it was a bit sad. And it was also my story that even though I was raised by an incredible therapist, and mum is my best friend, no question, she helps me with everything all the time, but I also found it weird. I grew up around it. I know how it works, but I found it strange to sit down and have this kind of dialogical kind of conversation. It just felt strange. That's why I do what I do with young people today. Not just playing sport. I'm talking to them. Something will come up. It's that third thing, which I'll talk about a little bit later if I have some time. But how do we get what we need? Sorry, how do we give to young people what they need? How do we give to masculine people, men, what they need? Not telling them that it should work when it doesn't. So unfortunately, I'm a kind of product of that. All these things I include because talking is absolutely crucial, even though it's more difficult for kind of masculine core people, traditionally young men. It's absolutely crucial. Mum's done some incredible research on why young men, don't seek out therapy. So these are all the kind of things I'm thinking as to this individuation stage of life is really hard anyway, throwing all these factors. So this one's crucial too. Response to stress and habits. This is quite simple. There's loads of things that Andrew Huberman's fantastic at inorganic, organic dopamine, how that affects you, inorganic, organic substances, how that affects you. Women, for example, are more likely to be diagnosed with depression and anxiety. They're also more likely to attempt self-harm. They will also attempt suicide, but it's more like they'll attempt self-harm before and less maybe aggressive, destructive ways of attempting suicide, whereas men are more likely to turn to substances, violence, more aggressive forms of self-harm and suicide. So just broadly, again, it doesn't have to be around gender, that's how I've written it, but some people will respond more so one way and the other way, depending on their orientation and life experiences. But what I do, I can skip over this slide up sometimes with just one sentence of what you do now is crucial for how you might respond to stress for the rest of your life. So again, saying to young people, you're in this stage, during this stage, what you choose to do is how you probably will always choose to respond to stress. I think of it like stress code genetics. What's your genetic stress code? For me, I actually found out, even though it's a very difficult period of my life, like going for a run or a walk and listening to music, that is my best response to stress. And thankfully, having seen all the wrong things, all the wrong responses to stress, unfortunately, that's my one. Sometimes I forget it and I try and do other things, but that works best for me. Bit of exercise, bit of music, reflection. Okay, and that's okay. Rather than people telling me, you must talk, you must sit down and have therapy. I go, great, therapy's fantastic, but it sits as one of my tools. My personal choice is this, right? I've done a lot of work and training and experience, so I can kind of manage my own mental health. But these young people, they're kind of, the engine's open, the parts are everywhere, as you've seen as parents and carers, right? But that's crucial. And again, the best one, I think, I know actually, as parents and carers, you would have seen, as I said, is it social media? Is it substances? Is it friends? It's like, no matter what they are choosing to do when they're stressed, the question is not what they are doing. Obviously, there are caveats there. Yes, it's dangerous, it's illegal. Why are you doing it? That question if you ask it 3 times, the Socratic method of questioning was invented by Socrates, feeds through to the birth of, Freudian, Rogerian, everything is trying to understand the origin of something. So as parents and carers, not what are they doing, but why are they doing it? That one for me, it really upsets kids because they go, okay, he's got to the issue, and then we can start working with that. So responses to stress are crucial. This one is beautiful. It's better explained in the theatre of young people, but again, active listening is crucial. The power of friendships. They found now there's a lot more science and study, which is wonderful. As beneficial as in having a good friend group, as they describe it, as like a healthy friend group, as beneficial as physical exercise. That's why, again, in the forest school, I go, you are all responsible for the mental health and well-being of everyone in this room, especially if you don't know them. How does someone respond to someone being upset? That will dictate how anyone will then respond. Will they express? Will they share? Will they share that load? And also things like half as likely to die, far healthier. We know this about sports and physical exercise. I know I've fired a lot at you, but just take it home as simply as this. Your friends are as important as going to the gym. We all know the kind of gym, diet, that kind of thing. So there's loads there. We talk about that again. The crucial one is psychoneuroimmunology, which is a brand new field of science, which is headed up by kind of Gabor Mate, 20 years old, but Gabor Mate, Stephen Porges, a couple of others as well. Essentially, as I say to young people, the way you deal with, remember earlier, like the way you deal with life's issues on a daily basis actually has now been found to dictate how your immune system responds to illness and disease. That's why you get the comorbidity of people are stressed, they get ill. It's literally the way it works. So it's fantastic to see that now being here. What I will do, I don't think we have time to do all of this, but I just want to mention the crucial parts of masculine mental health. As I said, it's what I'm employed to do and what I like to do, and it is a masculine core side. But as you can see, so much of what I do is just what do young people need, what do people need, and how do we do that? So I'll probably go through the rest of this reasonably quickly, but there's so much great stuff out there. But I mentioned the third thing earlier, so that's just there. And that is very simply young people who are of a masculine orientation, which tends to be nearly all men and a good number of women, let's put it like that, respond best to not just face-to-face talking, but it's me, you, and a third thing. Right, and that response, that can be connected to, is it a healthy third thing you're choosing? Is it drink? Is it substance? But going for a walk, parents always find out, well, my son talks. Or in the car, sometimes can be a bit trappy, but that can work. Or a friend of mine said, if I just kick a football with my son, and me at work is we're throwing a ball back and forth, it comes out. Recently my business partner is a bit younger than myself, 2 hours of throwing a rugby ball, and so much came up for him that was so important. So if you're thinking about how do I engage with my young person, sometimes it's cooking, sometimes it's sport. These things are crucial. So loads of research, nice guy syndrome, fourth wave of feminism, the kind of toxicity of the leftover messages being misused by people who are just trying to upset people. It can be really, really quite a lot. So I don't want to talk about that one too much because I need to talk about it for a while to explain it. Black pill extremism, toxic masculinity, the dad vacuum, these things we've heard. There's great people, Roman Kemp, government initiatives, social clubs, good gangs, these kind of things, they're all ways into the kind of solution. That's what informed Primal Grace. So this is interesting. I always talk about this. If something goes wrong, as a young man, as a male, I remember something going wrong, I didn't want to share. So this is time to write down, literally listed all these things here. Why am I feeling like I shouldn't share what is going on with me when I know that being vulnerable, there's strength in vulnerability. That's the company. That's how we work as well. Socialize to get on with it. Socialize to do it on your own. The testosterone paradox, which is very simply, if men do something that's perceived to be hard and succeed, they get a boost in testosterone. That's brilliant. That's proven in history. But unfortunately, if all they're told is to hold on to and deal with their own problems, that gets toxic. That gets difficult. So yes, a small amount, 10% you should deal with on your own. I always say that and be taught how to do that safely. It's part of what we do, but not 90%, which is the way it might be seen. So encourage to show no vulnerability, embarrassed if you're a nice guy, you want to hide your mistakes, shame for not being able to handle it, conditioned to defend ourselves against pain and vulnerability. Really interesting study, that one. Lower value and self-esteem. And what I have to do is present that and go, this is the issue I had, these are the things I felt, but in terms of solutions, got shame, you share it. Got pain and growth paradigm, which is strength through vulnerability. So I say that because young men are scared of being vulnerable, but they want to be strong. Good for anyone, as I said, masculine, in a masculine sense of being strong. It's a fantastic thing for the individual and for the group, but it comes from vulnerability. So again, lifting weights in the gym, break your muscles down to build strength, and young men latch onto that, obviously. It's quite easy to share the parallel, and they really enjoyed it at Forest of, so how do you get your strength emotionally? Oh, vulnerability, buttressing, sharing, building back up to more strength and repeating that. So question the socialization, we talked a bit about that. Wellbeing pillars, I'll go through that in a second. Primal grace, highly sensitive man, reach out to trusted friends. Anger is a secondary emotion. So I know I've fired a lot there, but anger and crying, which you'll see later, is secondary emotions, meaning there's a core meaning behind that. What's the why? So people get all the time, like the lads today or the young women today, they're always in the resets, always in the kind of behavioural support rooms because they're angry or they're sad. What's the origin? It takes time, so it's not easy, particularly for teachers. So those are the kind of things. And I'll talk about the dad vacuum at a later date. So I will move towards the solution-focused wellbeing. But this is a really interesting thing I do much better in person with young people. But that's something I'll be looking at in the future. Mentoring, I'll skip through that. Again, that's how I kind of found my mentors. This is what I want to finish on. So if there are any questions, interrupt me. However, I'll finish on this because it's absolutely crucial. So this is in development as an app. It'll be sent to the schools I work with or the companies that we work with. I use it myself to listen to my own advice. That's been pretty difficult. How it works, 10 questions. So on the app, you kind of self-report. The way it works is you answer these. This is something you can do with your young people as well, or do with yourself. How you answer it is, in the last 1 or 2 days, have I done an amazing job, which is a 10, or do I need to work on this, of these 10 pillars? So again, they'll reflect back to the primal grace philosophy as well as the symptoms of being a young person. And my young people love this. They resist it at the start and they realize, this is true, much like myself. I was struggling with something recently, say a week or two ago, a new kind of problem in life. And I went, I can't talk to young people like the Forest Year 10s who are fantastic and not do it myself. Lo and behold, it works. Again, primal grace, these 10 pillars of wellbeing, these are not mine. These are the best ways to do it. So answering these questions, and I'll kind of go through them, but sleep. Don't focus too much on what I've written. It's more the understanding of have you had a good amount of sleep? 1. Are you getting sunlight even on a kind of clouded day? 2. And giving yourself a score. Yes, have a question if you want to find that. Are you good? Oh, cool. Oh, such a good question. I work a lot with, again, without disclosing too much, I work a lot with neurodivergent children, particularly today. So it's really interesting. I would say 40 or 50, maybe 60% of the young people I work with at the trust or personally have symptoms of neurodiversity. So I wouldn't say I change it necessarily working with neurodiverse people, but what I find, which I'll show later, works really well with neurodiverse young people, because we're not just saying you have to do it like this. And again, for certain elements of neurodiversity, it's great to have structure and clarity, but kind of giving them some creativity, which they maybe don't have if they're being disciplined, to do that. But I'll try and answer that as we go. For example, I think a lot of it is ADHD that I work with, if that's what you're referring to, whereas the constellation of ADHD symptoms are very different from ASD or autism symptoms, but they do have that kind of crossover. So again, that's why I love this approach, and it works, is because it's lots of different ways to try things. So then some kids are really good at some things, but they know there's work there. So let's focus on that. In terms of neurodiversity, my experience is it as well. Really difficult. A lot of masking going on. That's why can we give them the time to actually talk, to then realize what's going on instead of this masking aspect. Thank you for the question. So in terms of that, sleep obviously is crucial. Very difficult for a lot of neurodiverse children because they're not being mindful during the day because they're fully switched on. They're constantly going. So when it comes to sleep, they either fixate, go through the night on something, or they haven't been mindful. Therefore, while we're trying to go to sleep, like any of us, trying to be mindful. So sunlight's crucial for everyone. And I find these pillars address, again, more biologically. And our biology is a fantastic way to aid our neurology, if that's any help. Yeah. Sunlight. Movement, crucial. Again, particularly neurodiverse kids. Like one today, he was outside of they're literally bouncing up and down and standing. I'm going to think more on ADHD because autism is a different presentation, but I've seen a lot of ADHD, and this stuff is absolutely brilliant. And again, tends to be more masculine core, tends to be more boys, but of course we know it's spread everywhere. And again, women might be masking it because they're not allowed to do it, that kind of thing. But movement, massive. And again, some people I work with who are disabled, who are not as able physically, that's why it's movement, not just kind of weights and cardio, but finding a way to do that, again, really good. Neurodiverse kids, they love doing what we do because they're out and they're moving. And then when they're inside, they might be a bit buzzy. They've got lots of things to think about and hopefully some positive fixations. Big thing is neurodiverse children and young people with behavioural issues, they get kind of like problemed, imprisoned, just put them over there, I don't want to deal with them. And that really difficult. They lose hope. Oh, I'm broken, I can't do anything. What we do is give them things they can do today, sometimes cans. So this is neurodiverse kids, but any young person, they probably know what's wrong, but they haven't got the ability to go and do it that day. So these 10 pillars are something everyone can do more or less for free. There's only one that might be paid. That's why we do it. That's why the foundation, charitable outreach, my work, the kids at school today, everywhere I go, everyone knows we're going to be hitting these 10 pillars because they're consistent. You can build habits and they're in control. So hopefully that addresses it. But if it doesn't, fire another question. Movement, so again, crucially, how have you done the last 1 or 2 days? Mindfulness is really good. And a friend of mine, mindfulness expert, particularly for young people, and he says 2 minutes a day change their life with music. Adapt it. Don't just be, it has to be a particular way of meditation, not at all. 2 minutes through the day to maybe get 15 a day, massive changes. And in terms of adapting mindfulness and meditation for people, particularly with autism, there's a really interesting link between neurodiversity and trauma. And also, when you are incredibly neurodiverse, certain aspects of what is normal for other people around mindfulness, it's actually very difficult for people with neurodiversity. That's why I encourage a creative approach to this. Is maybe you need a little bit of music, then you can calm. Maybe you don't need music, you can calm. Do it when you're walking, when you're lying, when you're sitting. And which I love these 10 pillars because it's just give them the idea. They can be creative, higher self-esteem, more functionality that way. Diet, massive. Also, this is designed, at least with the app as well, not just 80% nutritious, 20% pleasure, but are you getting enough? A lot of self-harm manifests in not eating, particularly for young men. I also have an eating disorder as a male, particularly young women, but as men as well, it comes up a lot. A lot of young lads, they don't have any lunch. So again, it's not necessarily saying, oh, you've done it wrong. It's just getting to highlight. So it's a daily habit of, oh, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, right? That's crucial. 4 bleeds into the 10 here, 10 bleed out into everything else. And you can add your own, but this is my attempt at that. So diet's crucial. Relationships, we've talked about it a lot today, but for me, it's like, what's their village? It's not just their friends and family, but their friends, family, loved ones, grandparents, people at church or people at the football club. Like, there's so many, like the richer the better, much like a diet. Again, these things are really, really important. They're proven, they're really important. So that's why Forest School's great. Lots of different types of kids, lots of interests. They're all put in together and it's really cool to see in a really beautiful space. So those relationships are important, they're crucial. Nature. I don't have time to talk a lot about it, but there's 45 years of science in Japan whereby they replaced antidepressant medication with prescribing time in nature, just being mindful around trees, essentially as simple as that. Reduced depression symptoms, improved immune response, reduced stress response, because we have that interaction with trees. That's the primal base aspect, a little nature work, particularly with young people. And now my kids come in and say, yeah, I was riding through the park, I was hugging trees. They love it. They love it because it works. So again, neurodiversity, this is quite an interesting one because it does the work for you. Like working in nature for me, so much is done for you. And then when they're in that classic classroom environment, the lights, the noise, the sound, it's difficult for them. But how do we alleviate some of that? It's very interesting. Crying and anger is a big one, as I said. A lot of young people don't feel like they can express their anger safely. A lot of them are punching walls. A lot of stuff happening. A lot of punching walls. So I go, hey, punch a punch bag with the glove on. You get the benefits, but then you're not hurting yourself, and you're learning your worth, saying your worth. You're valuable. Crying is a massive one. I always talk about that as a male because I could always have a whole career talking about crying as a male because it's so repressed, and such an interesting thing, getting young people to understand the importance of crying. And again, they come in and say, oh, do you know what? I did. Great. Yeah, like carrying weight you don't need to carry, you can drop it. So it's better expressed physically, and we'll do workshops like that. But crucial one, processing. Again, this is the only one I think is difficult to access without funding, which is why we do the foundation of how do we get people the talking they need. So yes, crucial to have counselling, crucial to have talking, coaching, mentoring. But also, if you talk to your friends and your family and they're great, you can have a really high score. But ideally, a professional or group work. So this is always a difficult one, but crucial, give yourself a score out of that. And this final one is, it might sound easy. I always found it very hard as a very kind of serious person trying to take on more than maybe I should, but reminding myself to enjoy things. Particularly for young people, they can feel under tremendous pressure. Enjoy. How is this for you? And it might be any of the 10 pillars, but it can be simple as that. And then the app will give you a score. And the cool thing is it's every day, so it's not shameful to get a low score. It's going to get danger, no. But the cool thing is literally you can go from a score of 30, I've done this, and going, I have not remembered any of my advice. You know, it might take a few days for it to kick in, but I'm now 7 or 8 days after taking it really seriously. I feel like a human being that's unable to remember how I felt a week and a half ago. Because every day you do it well, great, do it again tomorrow. Every day that you struggle and get a lower score, don't worry, you've got a chance to do it again tomorrow. So it's working with young people on their timelines and doing something practical. So that's something we'll be able to pass out. But that is probably the best way to finish. I'll probably end up on, that. So if there are any more questions, otherwise I would say if anything is, no questions. Yeah, perfect. Again, just to remind you, if anything that's come up, trigger the thought, a question, the best thing with safeguarding is just building a picture. So something you see of your young person, the teacher might see another aspect, and then something can be put together. And I know Forest School have, I think it's 5 days a week of place to be. So there is therapy, and it's a crucial part of this. But also, these 10 pillars young people can do for free on their own, as can you. And doing it with them, you're ticking off loads of pillars. So thank you very much. I know there's a lot of information. I talk very fast, but there's so much to do. But crucially, suicide prevention through wellbeing shouldn't be scary, should be enjoyable. We can all do it together. So thank you very much for your time. And I will hopefully see you again in the new year.